There's a particular assumption that's at play concerning everyday carry legal restrictions that needs to be pinpointed and talked about if there's going to be positive change in the world. So, everyday carry means it's a topic on what people carry with them usually every day. So, this consists normally of a flashlight, pocket knife, pen, your wallet, keys, in the States, pistol. And what's really interesting to notice is when you look at videos on EDC made by folks in the States and you look at the comments by people in other countries, they'll say things like, here in France, we're allowed to carry a pen outside. you know, it's it's kind of funny, but sad at the same time. Like this French guy was saying, "Oh, I'm allowed to carry a pen, and I think he said I can carry a flashlight too." Okay, so what is the specific assumption that's at play here? Well, the restrictions are based on the claim of safety, right? That's the government's go-to claim, for all their abusive control. Basically, it's to keep everyone safe, right? So, in order for this to be true, that by restricting what people can carry with them every day, it's making the world safer. In order for that to be true, the assumption that they are morally superior would have to be true. And why is that? Because the restrictions are not put on them. It's only put on, you could call the general populace, right? The state is saying, oh, you can't have a knife that's longer than this many inches, or you can't have a pocket knife that, opens quickly, has automatic or, assisted opening. Or, you can't have a pistol at all, or, and so on and so forth, right? So they're saying you can't have tools of this type, but of course we can. So what does that mean? Well, if that really was, again, increasing safety in the world, that would mean that they have to be morally superior, right? Because otherwise, it would just be a bunch of bad people with all weapons, right? And everyone else disarmed. And that's not a safe situation if the people with all the weapons aren't morally superior, right? Pretty basic reasoning here. But this is lost in a kind of cloud of propaganda and confusion where the state will highlight, violent acts and they'll say, we need to do something, right? And then the solution is, we need to further disarm nonviolent people, right? So this makes no sense, again, for reason number one being the assumption that just getting employment with the state somehow makes you angelic, which is obviously false. And then, secondly, the problem of folks doing criminal acts not paying attention to these laws, right? The problem of gun free zones making people sitting ducks, right? All of the law abiding, nonviolent citizens in a bowling alley or wherever see the gun free zone on the door and they say, oh, I guess I gotta leave my pistol at home. But then the person who's crazy and or on drugs, goes in there and can hurt people that can't defend themselves, right? Because he's not reading the gun free zone sign. He doesn't care about the gun free zone sign, right? And who put the gun free zone sign there, right? Oftentimes it's the state. So what you have is this institution disarming nonviolent people and then enabling violent people. And then this is supposedly increasing safety in society. It's completely false and insane. And just to help make this ultra clear, if someone wanted to carry a battle axe and walk around with a battle axe on their back, that isn't bad in and of itself, okay? Carrying a knife that's 1 inch longer than whatever your local government says is acceptable, right? That's not actually doing something bad, right? What is bad is abuse, right? All of this psychological operations and propaganda that the government puts out to further their control and power is based on a confusion. It relies on a confusion of fundamental ethics, which is simply the non abuse principle. If you're not actually committing aggression, if you're not actually initiating violence or stealing from anyone or deceiving anyone, you're not actually doing anything bad. And walking down the road with, a sword on your back or whatever isn't actually doing anything bad. I mean, is that really so hard to grasp? These tools can be used for defensive purposes. They are used for defensive purposes on a regular basis. When someone wants to commit a violent act, they will oftentimes use a tool, right? Because it's a force multiplier. So it makes sense to also carry a tool that can defend yourself adequately against their tool, right? So that you have a fighting chance, right? So when you see someone, say, walking down the road with a samurai sword on their back, you shouldn't assume automatically they're a violent person, right? Because that tool can and again often is used for defensive purposes. So by the state telling you you can only have these, minimal, uh, weaker tools, they're putting you in harm's way, right? They're putting you in a disempowered and, they're putting you at a disadvantage in a situation where someone could easily use a tool of greater capability to harm you, other people around you, right? This is just very basic, clear reasoning and perception of reality that again gets lost in all of the propaganda. So abuse is bad. Carrying a tool on your body is not bad. If society could get that down, we could actually make a lot of progress and no longer be duped by these communist control freaks that are actually just taking the world in this downward spiral where they get more and more power while simultaneously empowering, um, you know, violent, crazy people at the same time, right? So the good people are just put in a worse and worse situation where they are under threat by a tyrannical government and crazy criminals more and more. And this is pushed as a so called solution to the problem of violence in the world. And returning to the true moral law, which is the non abuse principle, which is just another way of thinking of the greatest commandments of the Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth, which is to love God, others, and yourself. A key, crucial truth to recognize and again promote in the public consciousness is that defensive force is actually an act of love, right? If someone is trying to harm you and you use proportional defensive force against them, you could say that is an act of self love, right? If someone is trying to harm someone next to you, say a family member, and you use proportional defensive force to stop them, that is an act of love, right? You don't want your loved one to be harmed. Protecting them is a form that loving action takes, right? So, again, basic reasoning lost in all of the garbage psychological operations that are just pushed through mass media which I recommend just turning off completely. So, again, when you see someone carrying a weapon, like a rifle, and they have that on their back, or you see, someone open carrying a pistol, you should not only not assume that they're a violent person, but you should be open to the possibility that they're actually a more caring person than your average person or whoever who isn't carrying any such tool. And why is that? It's because they are empowering themselves to be of more use to others around them, right? They are now more willing and able to use defensive force to protect others, right? And put themselves in harm's way while doing so, right? And there are folks that actually recognize this, and I've heard many people say that they've actually been thanked by just local people in their community for, say, open carrying a pistol because they feel the other individuals in the community feel more safe around them. I heard about a waitress who said that to a customer who was carrying, she actually wanted to be the waitress for that particular table because she felt more safe in their company, right? She not only wasn't assuming that they were violent, she was recognizing, well, hey, if some crazy guy comes in this restaurant, I want to be next to this guy here because he's going to be able to stop them, right? Common sense. So, what the government is doing with these EDC restrictions is against the true moral law, and again, is just empowering violent people. It's the complete opposite of real public safety and social justice. And one final point that I would think is common sense, but I shouldn't assume that everyone is recognizing this, again, because the common sense points aren't being, given in education, of course, entertainment or, the news or any of that. The response time calling 911, right? If you're thinking to yourself still, well, I still think it'd be safer if we just, we could just rely on the police. Like, you got to just think for a second here and recognize, well, if someone just breaks into your home or runs into a bowling alley or whatever, the police can't be there quick enough, right? You need to have folks already there with the ability, with the tools needed to adequately defend against someone using a tool in a violent way, right? So that's why it also makes sense for folks to have EDC, to whatever extent they want, right? If you're walking down the road, someone just jumps out of a alleyway and attacks you, right? What, you gonna call 911? Like, is that really gonna help you in that moment? Of course not. You need to be ready immediately. So just reason upon reason, fact upon fact on why there shouldn't be any EDC restrictions on nonviolent people. If you want to carry an AR-15, that's your right. If you want to carry a samurai sword, likewise, as long as you're not initiating violence, you're actually in a position to better carry out the true moral law by being able to adequately exercise defensive force against a violent attacker.